Hey guys, it's Max. Welcome to my hands-on review of the Sony A7R3. Now, it is bright and early, not very bright though, and I'm headed to the airport so I can spend the next couple days along with a lot of other camera press and get to shoot with the A7R3 in a variety of situations and let you guys know my opinion on it. Now, this is as much for myself as it is for you guys because I already have this camera pre-ordered. I think it's going to be perfect for what I need from it, but we'll be checking that out, and of course I'm going to share my opinions with you guys as well. Now, most of the expenses were covered by Sony, so I gotta let you guys know about that, but my opinions are still my own. I've been on a few of these Sony press trips, and Sony never puts any pressure on any reviewer to say anything at all. They actually want to hear our opinions, they have engineers there, and they have listened to feedback from us as they're developing new cameras. So I wish I could go to a couple more different camera companies' press events. I may be able to do that in the future, but I really enjoy these because I get to get my hands on the cameras and test them, obviously, before they are out and share my opinions. And just like that, I am in Sedona, Arizona. Just got my gear, A7R3, 24-105, 85-14, 70-200 G Master, 12-24 G, bunch of stuff, my bags, and I'm excited to start shooting. So I'm here in my room now. I've had a few minutes to play with the camera and it's about dinner time, so I'm gonna have to head out, but I figured out a few things already with the camera. One, there is the S-Gamut3 Cine profile that was missing out of the A7R2. We have the S-Log3 and we have the Gamma Display Assists. There is no crop if you're shooting any version of 4K or 120 frames per second. Previously, if you're doing 120 frames per second, like on the A7S2, it crops in a ton. On the A63 and the 6500, it crops in a little bit. And on those cameras, if you're shooting 4K 30, it crops in a little bit from that sensor. Here, we have no crop in any of the modes. The screen does not dim if you're shooting 4K or 120. You can put into that sunny brightness mode, and it's gonna stay that way compared to a lot of the other cameras that get like almost to the minimal brightness, which really sucks. So I'm gonna go head out for dinner. First, I gotta take these straps off. I hate these straps. And then I'm trying out this new little shotgun mic that they say gives better quality audio. Your audio bit rate is higher when you're going through this jack. But I'm gonna switch over to this camera, and anytime I'm gonna be shooting any vlog stuff with this camera, at the bottom left-hand side, I'm gonna have a little R3 so you guys know that I'm shooting with this camera instead of the A6500. So I'm shooting with the A7R3. 16,000 ISO, and I'm just walking. The footage looks surprisingly smooth. 32,000 ISO, and it is dark here. In this section, we're going to be taking a look at low light, so pay attention to the bottom left hand side. I'm going to be switching between the full frame mode and the Super 35 crop and adjusting my ISO. So take a look and see what differences you can tell, and you can comment those down below. In a little bit, we're going to also switch over to 1080p at 120 frames per second and see how that handles in this very low light, underexposed situation.
All life is very much the same. We're all relying on the same sun, moon, earth. We had this experience, and while we're here, we're supposed to be making ourselves complete in some way or fashion.
So what we're going to do here in about half an hour or so, that's all, I promise. just kind of give a high-level overview of the trip itself.
So we had a really nice dinner and did some low light shooting, you guys probably saw. Now I'm at 6,400, and so far when I was walking I was surprised by how good the ibis looked like. Sonys are terrible when you're walking and trying to use the ibis, but this thing looks pretty good, at least on the rear LCD. Maybe not GH5 good, but it looks quite good. With the A7R2, the full frame 4K mode, you really didn't want to go above 1600 ISO because the low light got really, really bad. Sony said that they revamped it, they're using more data now, the low light has been improved, and I've definitely seen that has been improved, and it really looks close to the aps-c crop. So you guys check it out for yourselves. Honestly, even watching on a 5K display, it's very difficult to tell a difference, which is great because with the A7R2 in the full frame mode, the low light was quite poor if you got above, say, 2000 or 3200 ISO. Comparing these two crop mode and full frame modes, I would say the full frame mode is a little bit cleaner here at 3200 ISO, which is interesting. At 6400 ISO, they are very close once again, but I would say the full frame mode is a little bit cleaner. At 12,800, once again, the crop mode is a little bit more detailed, and you do see noise a little bit more in the shadow, say on the right-hand side of my face. And at 25,600, I would say there's not a big difference in detail here, but we are seeing a tad bit more noise in the crop mode. Now let's compare the A6500 GH5 to the A7R3 with both of its modes, and at 1600 the Sonys are really, really close. I would say the best is the A6500, followed by the full frame R3 and the Super 35 R3, and the GH5 we definitely do see more noise. Now jumping up to 3200 ISO, I think it's basically the same story. The Sonys are quite close, probably very similar on YouTube, whereas the GH5 we're definitely seeing a lot more dancing noise. At 6400, the GH5 is falling apart now, where the Sonys look quite clean. The A6500 once again is the best. So the GH5 is definitely not usable anymore, while the Sonys are definitely clean enough to be used, especially if you're uploading to the internet. But it's interesting that the A6500 is showing more noise than both of the A7R3's modes now, so they kind of took a flip at 12,800 ISO. Now to finish it off, 25,600 ISO, so we did have to drop off the GH5 since it can't shoot this high. And it's interesting, the A6500 once again has more noise, but it also has a color shift now that's definitely more noticeable, and we're noticing the banding a lot more than the A7R3, so it seems like it's more sensitive to that. So full frame cleanest, Super 35 next, and then the A6500. If I look really tired, that's because I slept 4 hours last night, but it was all worth it because I edited together a little low light video and a little comparison. The problem is that the internet is extremely slow here, and in the 4 hours that I slept, it only updated 58% so far. Breakfast is basically over now. Maybe I'll be able to grab something before we have to head out.
After 5 hours, this is only 63%.
How am I supposed to get videos out for you guys with this internet?
Still uploading.
You know, if you've been here once, you're always looking forward to coming back, right? Yep. For those who are here for the first time, well, now it's a part of your reality too. Today we gotta go to two very special places. Gonna go to Slide Rock Park up in the Oak Creek Canyon. Oak Creek Canyon is a very beautiful, very special place for me just to do the drive without even getting off. This is one of the top 10 scenic drives in the United States, but we're gonna get a chance to come out in one of the pearls, one of the most beautiful spots in the whole Oak Creek Canyon. We're gonna spend more time out there, and then we're gonna head to a Tibetan Buddhist stupa.
There are a lot more vortexes than just 7, and it depends on you, on your state of mind at this particular moment, how you will experience this particular vortex.
There's so much to explore, so much beauty to see out here. So if we've got Snoopy Rock, what are we not gonna have here in Sedona, right?
This place is super cool, very beautiful, even though it's rocks. During this next section, take a look at the 4K detail. I'm going to be using both Super 35 mode and full frame so you guys could see what the image looks like between the two modes.
Mama and Papa brought us to this world, to this physical presence from the spirit world. And the greatest gift that was given to us, the greatest gift, is the heart we obtained at the time we were born. Yavapai, they were born in that canyon. They came from the love between the sun and Kalamadupukia, the goddess.
Divine energy in our lives that's taking us towards more unity, love, harmony, and so on. And when you come up to the water, what I like to do is just put your hands into the water and then open them up from the bottom of your heart, and then it's gonna be like, the water will accept these right from your hands.
We're gonna do some rose petals, release them to release all the bad energy, hopefully all my sleepiness. I don't know if that works, but. So here's one of the biggest reasons why I pre-ordered this camera, not because the image quality is going to be better for video or something, but because the screen can be nice and bright in sunny mode when you're outdoors. So here I'm recording 4K video, there's no dimming of the screen. And then like here I'm also recording 4K video. The screen is more reflective and the power output is much lower. It's basically unusable outdoors. The only way I can use it is EVF or just try to guess and get good at your exposures, unless you're using like a small HD or something like that. But it really is terrible, as you guys can see. Right now I'm shooting an S-Log3, which we now have with this camera, but I wanted to give you guys a little bit of info from last night. While I was editing, I was also doing some tests with overheating and some battery tests. So no overheating logos. I only was able to record for an hour on a fresh battery. Typically like the A6300 would overheat after like 20 minutes. My 6500 would go about maybe 45 minutes, 50 minutes, but the overheating logo would turn on after about a half hour. Now the other thing I tested is hooking up a USB Type-C battery bank to the new USB-C port on the camera. That new port is able to accept more power than the previous micro USB, and I recorded for a half hour and only 6% of the battery drained. So it's not enough power to keep the camera recording in 4K with ibis turned on, autofocus and all of that, and not drain the battery, but it supplements it, and that should get you about 7 to 8 hours of battery life on a single battery, which is great if you're recording conferences or something else where you need really good battery life, where you're doing time lapses. You can hook up a battery bank to it, and if you stop recording, if you're not continuously recording, then whenever you're not recording, the battery is going to be charging. So I really love that feature. It's something I do miss on my Panasonics. Even though they do have that port, it does not accept a charge. So I really like that about this camera.
Stupas get their spiritual energy from the place that they're built, the way that they're built from a spiritual point of view, not a physical point of view. So I'll tell you that what looks like a great big concrete structure here is actually a great big hollow concrete structure. And it is stuffed, like literally jam-packed from bottom to top with what we refer to as offerings.
So what we're looking at here is a 4K full frame image using the 24-105 f4, and we're going to compare it to a Super 35 crop using the same lens, and the A6500 with the same lens, along with the GH5 with the 12-35 2.8, which is one of the sharpest lenses for that camera. Placing the shots side by side, I can hardly tell a difference on a 5K display. Yes, the GH5 looks slightly softer, but it's not a huge difference, and it's crazy how close these match up. When we punch into 200%, which is 1080p, it's easier to tell the difference. The A7R3 in the Super 35 crop mode looks the most detailed, but that could be false because it just has more contrast in the shot since the lighting was changing. And I would say in second place in this shot is the A6500, with the full frame mode of the A7R3 being in third place, but all the Sonys look really, really close, and I think on YouTube you probably would not be able to see a difference. And then we can really see where the GH5 comes in at the bottom right hand side. It is less detailed, and it's interesting to see quite a bit of noise in the shadow areas even though we are at the base ISO. The Sonys look super clean, but I can see a little bit of compression artifacts, with the A6500 having more than the A7R3 even though they use the same exact codecs and bit rates. So my thought is that Sony updated the compression algorithm on the new A7R3. Now we're going to compare some 1080p footage both at 24 and 120 frames per second with the full frame and Super 35 crop, A6500 and GH5 handheld, so you guys can see the aliasing that may come up. At 24 frames per second, the full frame mode definitely looks both more detailed and with less aliasing in the image, which is interesting because the camera has so much more data to deal with. Looking at 120 frames per second, they both have a similar amount of aliasing, maybe slightly less in the full frame mode, but you can clearly see that once again we have more detail in full frame compared to the aps-c crop. So if you're shooting 1080p, definitely shoot in full frame on the A7R3. Comparing it to the A6500, the R3 looks way more detailed and with maybe a little bit less image artifacting at the same time. So this is really impressive. At 120 frames per second, once again, the R3 is more detailed. Not as much of a difference this time, but still, it's clear to see how much more detail we have with this new camera. Now, the A7R3 has finally met its match, going against the GH5, which definitely has more detail and better ibis stabilization at the same time. Now, Panasonic has been known for some really good or the best 1080p, especially compared to Sony's and Canon's, and it's clear to see here. Now at 120 frames per second, it's a different story. Now the GH5 might have a little bit more detail, but we have a lot more aliasing in the image, which definitely is distracting. So for this one, I would definitely have to pick the A7R3 because you could add a little bit of sharpening and get a better image overall. The next shoot we did was mountain biking, and as you guys could see, they're mainly just riding around. There were no jumps or anything extreme like I was hoping for, but that gave me a good chance to test the video autofocus. Most of these shots are at 1080p 120 frames per second so that I could slow it down, and when I went out there at first I was a bit disappointed in the video autofocus. It definitely seems slower than the Sony A9, which I still think it is slower than that camera, and it also seems slower than my A6500. Now, once I went into the settings and I switched it to the fastest tracking and the fastest shifting, it definitely got improved. Now, I still think it is a touch behind the Sony A9. My experience with that camera was just shocking how well it could track somebody sprinting full on to the camera at 85mm 1.4 with a G Master lens, and it was just incredible. So I don't know if there's a big difference in the autofocusing systems, or maybe it just has to use more data or more processing to read out that huge sensor, and that's why there's a little bit less performance. But overall, it did a fairly good job. I didn't get 100% keepers, but this is way better than using a system that does not have autofocus, and as you guys can see, it does track fairly well. I'm out here outside in the direct sun. It's probably about 75 degrees here with a light breeze. And typically the Sonys will heat up more, especially if the sun is hitting them. So I wanted to do this test outside. I already tested inside and recorded for an hour continuously with no issues, with the ibis on, autofocus on, the rear LCD with high brightness. And I didn't even get the little heat logo, which typically will stay on for a while before it overheats. So I'm going to test outside for an hour. I have 56% battery life left, and that will last over an hour. And obviously I have an hour of memory space on here. So recording 4K right now at the full bit rate, and I will set a timer so I can check up on it in almost a half hour, and we'll see how it does. So I think it's been almost a half hour. 29 minutes, 18 seconds. No overheating logos yet. And look at the battery life. It's barely dropped from 53 to only 39%, and that's after a half hour of 4K recording. And look how bright the screen is. That's the best thing about this new camera. The A6500, you wouldn't be able to see anything right now, just reflections and a screen that looks like it's off. So as soon as this hits exactly 30 minutes, it's gonna start off. I'm gonna hit record again. So it just reset. My alarm went off on my phone, and as I was walking, it turned off. But no overheating light. So 1 hour of recording went from 53 to 19%. My whole battery be gone on an A7R2 or A6500. So the battery life is incredible. Yeah, not even an overheating logo, whereas the A6500 would overheat maybe about 45 to 55 minutes, somewhere around that range. The A7R2 may or may not overheat, but the logo would definitely be on maybe around the 45-minute mark. And this guy, not even a logo. So very happy with it. And so far, just talking to Jordan from the Camera Store TV and some other video shooters, they spent a while shooting and they haven't even seen the logo. So I can't say for sure that it can't overheat just because of the A6300 incident where mine did not overheat, but everybody else's, or many people, other people's did when they received them, including my own. So I don't want to say it won't do it, but so far, this thing is doing quite well. So we just got done doing a sunset shoot here. Spent about an hour and a half, 2 hours here. I tried doing video, and the sun went down, I think, behind some clouds. I don't think it turned out too great. We're gonna head out to dinner. So far, the rear LCD screen isn't really any more detailed. Nowhere near like a Canon, especially maybe a Panasonic and a Samsung's. They're way sharper. You see what's in focus. I think it has been improved a little bit, but definitely not enough. The ibis seems to be improved in video mode. So I'm going to go ahead and do some walking tests right now with the A6500 that I'm shooting on now, GH5, and the A7R Mark III, and check what kind of difference we're going to get. I know the GH5 is going to be the best, but with the A9 that launched recently, it wasn't any better than the A6500. It's practically the same. The A7R3 looks much better than the A6500, which performs similar to the A7S2, the A9, and the previous Sony cameras. And the A7R3 is worse than the amazing GH5, but it's good to see Sony start to step it up on the ibis. Now let's take a look at rolling shutter. This is the A7R3 in full frame mode, and I was really quite impressed by how well it performed. There's a little bit, but this is the least amount of rolling shutter that I've seen in any Sony camera. This is the aps-c crop. Once again, it's very hard to notice the rolling shutter, which is fantastic. Taking a look at the GH5, which performs similar to like a FS7 and other high-end cinema cameras. It might be slightly better than the A7R3, but not by much. And lastly, we have the A6500, which is just like jello all over the place and does a really bad job. And we finished off the day with some delicious dinner. Alright guys, so it's the start of a new day. This is going to be the last full day here. Yesterday, basically just ended up having a long dinner and trying to go to bed early because I got 4 hours of sleep for 3 days in a row. Especially being at home with the little baby too. So I got some sleep, and I'm going to be heading out and doing something super cool, something I never really thought I'd get to do, going on a helicopter. I'm super excited for that. So what about my kind of thoughts with this camera? I've used it for 2 full days already here. Overall, for video shooters, it's basically A7R2 with the low light issue fixed in full frame, and Overheating seems to not be an issue. And other than that, it's basically just like an evolution of the A7R2. They fixed the usability and the handling issues that kind of plague these Sony cameras. The battery, the rear LCD screen dimming, cropping in. They added the S-Log3, the 1080 at 120. So they basically just fixed the issues, put it up to par to their other cameras. And so it's not like it's a huge change for video shooters, but it's going to make it a lot easier, more enjoyable to use. You don't have to worry about a battery dying after 50 minutes. You have over 2 hours now. So if you like your A7R2 and you want to make it a lot more convenient to use, this is the camera for you. So that was incredible. First time being on a helicopter. Very, very cool. I don't know how my shots looked. You guys saw them there. A lot of wind though, and on the gimbal would just cut out depending how the wind is kicking in. Fortunately, I don't have the crane too, because that would have done much better in that situation. Really fun. Hopefully I got some decent shots. Now it's time to go back and start editing so much of this together. So we're here on a shoot. There's some models, some cars, some cowboys. It's quite a production, as you guys can see. And there's some 18,000 watt HMI lights to go against the sun, so it's pretty ridiculous. So it's really bright and early, 6 a.m. right now, and I had another 4 hours of sleep, but that's okay, editing stuff. Now, I get to do something cool that I didn't think I was going to get a chance to do. So what better way to finish off this review and this trip than with a hot air balloon ride? I didn't think I'd get to go, but it worked out. They're doing one more trip, and so once again I stayed up late, editing the little montage footage with 120p 1080 and then also 4K that you guys probably have seen. So what are my final thoughts on the A7R3? Well, it's not a groundbreaking new camera. It's basically an evolution. They're fixing a lot of things that they had wrong with the original one. If you're happy with your A7R2, A6500, you don't need to upgrade. The video quality hasn't really changed in 4K. Well, you have better low light in the full frame mode and better autofocus, but mostly it's just the convenience factors. And to me, it's definitely worth it. And you're a photographer, if you're making money, then I think it is worth it because you have much better battery life. Instead of an hour, about 2.5 hours in 4K shooting. Better ibis, dual card slots, the rear screen doesn't dim. We have a touchscreen with a joystick on there. We have S-Log3 now, 1080p at 120. So we are getting a lot of new features, but in general, it's just more, it's easier to use, it's more efficient in what it's doing, and it does a better job. Just getting down to the image quality, unless you're shooting full frame in low light, it hasn't really changed. It was good before, it's good now. but it's mainly the usability features. So if you're making money with your camera and you use it a lot for video, I think it's worth selling and upgrading. And if you're happy when you found how to work around the issues that you've had, or you're not making money, you're doing this as a hobby, I don't think it's worth the money. You can still get great results with the A7R2 or the A6500 even. You just won't have all of those conveniences. So I've had a good time here. Like most of you guys know, I have this camera pre-ordered along with that 24-105 lens. If you're making money, like I said, it's worth the upgrade. So hopefully you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, please give it a like, and if you guys are new, hit that subscribe button and enable those notifications. If you guys want to see raw video files from this camera that you guys can download, you can grade. There's some S-Log, 4K and 1080p at 120. You guys can support us on Patreon, and then there you guys will find the links to download those files. And that's just basically a thank you to those that support us for as little as $1 a month. It does help out, and we definitely appreciate it. I'm gonna have links to like the lenses that I used in the video description, so you guys could use those if you guys want to support us as well. And overall, hopefully you guys enjoyed this video. I hope it turned out enjoyable and fun to watch, and along with being informative. Thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.